Division headquarters had been among the first elements to move. After it boarded the Liberty ship Lucien B. Maxwell in Southampton on 4 September 1944, it sailed into the English Channel on the morning of 7 September 1944. After an uneventful crossing, the Lucien B. Maxwell dropped anchor off Utah Beach at 8:30 p.m. the same day. Later that evening, the port commander directed the skipper of the Maxwell to discharge personnel and cargo the following day. On 8 September 1944, Division headquarters came ashore and went into operation in the vicinity of Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. Utah Beach differed from Omaha Beach, where after the D-Day landings, elaborate port facilities were constructed, similar to the Mulberry Artificial Harbour in the British sector at Arromanches. However, a summer tempest wrecked the port facilities at Omaha Beach, and whatever material could be salvaged was used to repair and reinforce Arromanches. Utah Beach never had facilities comparable to those of Omaha or Arromanches. It had more limited constructed facilities serving it, though it would continue to receive heavy traffic in men and materiel from lighters, the various landing craft, makeshift rhino ferries, and barges ferrying between larger vessels and the beach. Because bad weather had disrupted the plans for sailing and debarkation, the other units of the 94th Infantry Division arrived somewhat later than originally intended. 3 combat teams were created for the crossing: Combat Team 301, Combat Team 302, and Combat Team 376. Combat Team 301 began landings on Utah Beach on 6 September 1944 from the Neutralia and the Crossbow, which held the foot troops of the 301st Infantry. The regimental command post was set up in the outskirts of Sainte-Marie-du-Mont. On 8 September 1944, Colonel Hagerty, commanding the 301st Infantry, left for the 6th Armored Division headquarters at Plouay, France. The same day, the 301st Infantry started their move to Lorient. An overnight bivouac was made en route, in the vicinity of Rennes. On the 9th, the regiment moved into the line beginning the relief of the 6th Armored Division. The 302nd Infantry's motorized elements moved to Southampton on 5 September 1944, and all vehicles and their accompanying personnel had been loaded by the evening of 6 September. Foot troops followed on the 7th, and they debarked on Utah Beach the following day, unloading ahead of the motor elements. The foot troops then marched to the vicinity of Vierville, the beachhead location of the regimental command post. On the 9th, the motor elements of the regiment began unloading, but due to rough water off the beach, a week passed before all personnel were ashore. On 10 September 1944, an advance party from the 302nd Infantry left for Lorient. And 2 days later, the regiment minus the 2nd and 3rd battalions departed for Rennes, where it was expected it would reassemble. Colonel Earl A. Johnson's regimental headquarters, 1st Battalion and Anti-Tank Company moved to the vicinity of Plouay on the 15th, where the command post opened at 1800 hours. The 2nd and 3rd Battalions completed their movement on 16 September 1944 and rejoined the regiment. That afternoon, all 3 battalions were committed. The 376th Infantry, which had sailed from the United Kingdom on the 7th of September, began landing on the 9th. Bob Adair, a veteran of Company I, 376th Infantry, remembered, "LCI's, Landing Craft Infantry, took us from the Cheshire to the Normandy beach where we disembarked onto the sands carrying most of what we owned. It was quiet on that grey September day, with little remaining to show that 3 months before other young men had jumped off their boats under fire to fight their way off the beaches. With no one shooting at us at all, we marched off in a light rain to a meadow about 5 miles from the beach, where we set up pup tents and spent the night. Carrying about 120 pounds per man, we were too tired to think much of our first steps in France. We then stayed in those fields for several days while the division reorganized. Our biggest problem was food. We seemed to have sustained but one casualty upon invading France, but that was indeed a tragedy. The I Company kitchen truck carrying the salt and condiments fell into the sea when it was being transferred from the Cheshire to a landing craft. And even Sergeant Rosenberg couldn't give us much of an appetite for unsalted and unseasoned food. Spencer Loomis, another member of Company I, remembered, "LCIs took us to the beach. After the company hit the beach, there was a long march, 9 or 10 miles to the bivouac area. It was raining and men dropped out because of heavy sodden packs. Griping was rampant. Upon reaching their destination, the final blow was finding out there was not a dry place to sleep. It was an orchard." His buddy, Joe Scuddder, remembered the march as well. The long, hard march from the beach, then laying down in the open field to catch about 2 hours sleep and waking up covered with dew. L. Reynolds recalled, "We boarded landing craft after supper. With the wait for the tide, we reached shore at Utah Beach at night. That night we made the toughest hike in my memory. All night with heavy packs and sore feet, we went into a bivouac area for a few days, still not combat conscious." Orders for movement to Lorient had to be countermanded when the St. Nazaire pocket was added to the 94th Infantry Division's containing mission, together with the relief of the 83rd Infantry Division, making this experienced division available for operations elsewhere. The regiment's march objective was shifted accordingly, and Colonel Harold H. McClune's men eventually moved to Rennes and from there to their new front lines around Saint-Nazaire. The 301st Field Artillery Battalion loaded in LSTs in Weymouth during the 4th and 5th and landed on Utah Beach the next day. For 3 days the battalion bivouacked in the vicinity of the beach. On the 9th it moved to Rennes. The following day the 301st Field Artillery headed for forward positions in the Pont-Scorff area. These were reached by nightfall. The 356th Field Artillery Battalion departed from Trowbridge on 4 September 1944. It crossed the channel without an incident and on the 10th moved to Rennes, where it remained overnight. The morning of the 11th, the 356th moved to positions south of Plouay. Position area surveys were completed and wire communications necessary for registration of the guns were laid before sundown. The battalion's first mission was to reinforce the fires of the 128th Field Artillery Battalion of the 6th Armour Division, this battalion being in direct support of 1st Battalion, 301st Infantry. The 919th Field Artillery Battalion departed from Trowbridge on 5 September 1944, reaching the coast of Normandy on the 8th. This battalion, the direct support artillery of the 376th Infantry, upon debarkation headed for Vigneux, Loire-Inférieure, in the Saint-Nazaire sector and went into bivouac there on the 14th. The battalion officially rejoined the combat team when it relieved the 908th Field Artillery Battalion of the 83rd Division on 17 September 1944. Battery A took positions to the north of Vigneux, in the center of the sector of 3rd Battalion, 376th Infantry, while batteries B and C went into position to the south of Vigneux, supporting the 1st Battalion of this regiment. The 390th Field Artillery Battalion also left Trowbridge on the 5th of September. After a 24-hour delay at Portland, the unit sailed for France on the morning of the 7th. The LSTs reached Utah Beach at 0330 hours on the 8th and began unloading at 0730 hours. Following debarkation, the battalion moved to Beaumont. and on the 9th trucked to Rennes for an overnight stay. The next day, reconnaissance parties reconnoitered position areas and observation post locations as the main body closed at Plouay. Positions were occupied on the 12th. Communications were established and registration completed by 1915 hours of the same day. The 94th Infantry Division's deployment was completed, and the first troops had already been in contact with the German defenders of the fortress pockets of Saint-Nazaire and Lorient. In the months to come, the 94th Infantry Division men would get their first taste of what war in the European theatre of operations looked like.